There is no doubt that Ebenezer Scrooge was a miserable, mean-spirited misanthrope. But he wasn't always like that. Something turned him into a cold-hearted curmudgeon. And of course, he changed. His visions transformed him from a miser into as good a man as the good old city of London knew. But how? What could have happened in his brain to bring about such dramatic changes? Welcome to Insane History. I'm Professor Graeme Yorston, and today I'm exploring the miraculous transformation of Ebenezer Scrooge from my perspective as a neuropsychiatrist. Was it just masterful storytelling by Charles Dickens, or could any of it have happened in real life? And if so, what exactly was wrong with Ebenezer Scrooge? When Dickens began writing his Christmas story in October 1843, he was already a successful author. But his latest novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, as usual being released in monthly instalments, wasn't doing very well, and with a growing family to support, money was tight. He needed a hit and dashed off the 30,000-word novella in a 6-week blaze of creative genius. And although the ink was only dry on the final pages on the 3rd of December, it was in the bookshops by the 19th, in a lavish edition with gilded pages and hand-coloured illustrations. The first print run of 6,000 copies sold out by Christmas Eve, but unfortunately it didn't quite make him the profit he was hoping for, as the production costs were so high. It wasn't just about money, however. Dickens had been wanting to do something to highlight the terrible living conditions endured by the children of the poor for some time. Earlier in the year he had visited tin mines in Cornwall, which employed children as young as 10 to do back-breaking labour for 10 hours a day. And the ragged schools in London, which had been set up by charities to provide basic education to children who would otherwise never have had the opportunity to learn. And Dickens was no stranger to the agonies of poverty himself, having witnessed it all at first hand as a 12-year-old boy, when his father was thrown into debtors' jail, and he had to leave school, give up his books, and work for a pittance in a filthy, rat-infested shoe-blacking factory. His first thoughts were to write a political pamphlet on the matter, but he chose instead to do what he did best, tell a story. And fictional though his characters may have been, the starvation, disease and ever-present threat of an early, painful death were all too real in Victorian London. And his embodiment of all that was wrong, Ebenezer Scrooge, was Dickens' most famous creation, his squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, based on a real person, or did he pluck him out of the air? There are many theories as to possible models for Scrooge, including the banker Jemmy Wood, said to have been the richest commoner in His Majesty's dominions, and a Member of Parliament, John Elwes, who is said to have dined on maggoty meat rather than throw it away. But in truth, Scrooge's callous response when asked for a charitable donation, "Are there no prisons, and are the union workhouses still in operation?" was a response that would not have been uncommon in a society where the divide between rich and poor was a gaping chasm, that many on the rich side did not want narrowed. Dickens describes Scrooge as secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. He also tells us a little about his physical condition. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shrivelled his cheek, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue. There are many ways these details could be interpreted in medical terms, but focusing on his shrivelled cheek, and the fact that Scrooge always took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, suggests to me that he may well have been a bit on the undernourished side. This is certainly how Dickens' illustrator John Leech portrayed Scrooge in the first edition. And if shrivelled old Ebenezer was not eating enough, it is also likely that he would have been short of vitamins. Rickets, caused by a lack of vitamin D, was one of the commonest nutritional disorders in polluted Victorian cities because the smog all but blotted out the sunlight. And as well as leading to bendy bones in children, low vitamin D levels can cause dry eyes and depressed mood in adults, both of which fit Dickens' descriptions of our man. Could Scrooge have been vitamin deficient? Well, I don't think he was the kind of person to go on healthy walks in the countryside for fresh air and to soak up the rays. And I think the melancholy tavern where he ate is just the kind of place that would have sold the cheap, adulterated food that was so common in Victorian England. I suspect the bread he dipped his soup in probably had as much chalk, alum and plaster of Paris in it as flour. And there aren't many vitamins in those. Are there any other clues as to what might have ailed Ebenezer? Dickens tells us external heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather chill him. This could of course be a description of his personality, but it could also be read as impaired temperature sensation, something that occurs in people whose peripheral nerves are not working properly. This can happen in many different medical conditions, one of which is thiamine deficiency. But now, we must consider Scrooge's strange perceptual experiences. The first occurs as he is opening the front door of his gloomy suite of rooms. He sees in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley, his long-dead partner, who was even more parsimonious than himself. Scrooge dismisses it with a humbug, and goes and sits before his barely flickering fire. But he is still thinking about his former business associate when he sees a disused bell swinging, and hears the clanking of chains. The cellar door flies open, and Marley walks in. We are so familiar with the story that we simply accept at face value that this was the ghost of Marley, warning Scrooge of the consequences of his miserliness. But at first, Scrooge himself doesn't believe the vision is real. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. This is reality testing. We all do it when we are startled by a noise in the night or see a shadow drifting across our field of vision. Is it a monster? No, it's just a creaking pipe or a change in the light. Reality testing is our way of rationalising or explaining away an experience that can't be real. It is an aspect of mental functioning that is impaired in people who are developing a psychotic illness. They start to believe the strange experiences they are having are real. And this is exactly what happened to the normally unperturbable Scrooge. Half-starved, half-frozen, sitting in the gloom with his brain well below par, he shivered, wiped away the perspiration from his brow, and believed Marley was real. Unsettled, Scrooge goes to bed and is instantly asleep, only to awaken in a confused state at midnight, not knowing how much time has passed. He waits anxiously for the 1 o'clock chime, unsure if he has fallen asleep again, and then sees a spirit before him. A strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. And as Scrooge tries to make sense of this complex, multisensory hallucination, the figure fluctuates in its distinctness. Whatever it is, the spirit takes Scrooge back to his childhood. As readers, we know almost nothing, and yet everything we need to know about his emotionally deprived early years. We know he was left in a damp, decaying school over the Christmas holidays, with only a few books and his youthful imagination for company. We know that he sobs at the very sight of his school when it is revealed to him. We know that his dearest sister tells him, "Father is now so much kinder than he used to be." But we see neither the kind nor the not-so-kind father. And then his sister is gone, forever, leaving behind his infant nephew Freddie. Neglected by his parents, traumatised by the loss of his sister, no wonder Scrooge struggled to warm to the child she left behind. And even though the generous and kind-hearted Mr. Fezziwig treated him like a son, he could not undo the damage that had been done. And we see how Scrooge lets his chance of happiness slip from his grasp as his betrothed ends their relationship. "You fear the world too much. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion, gain, engrosses you." And engrossed he certainly was, becoming ever more miserly with each passing year. You might think that miserliness, being such a common personality trait, would have been extensively studied. But no. Other than Freud's suggestion that it occurs as a reaction to too much pressure or punishment during potty training, it has been largely ignored as a topic for research. But miserliness does seem to be a stable personality trait over time, and it has been shown to be heritable, although unique life events probably play a bigger role in its development than in most other facets of personality that have been studied. So, Ebenezer may well have been one of a long line of miserly Scrooges. But it was his traumatic life experiences that tightened his tight-fistedness and hardened his heart. After the first visitation, he again falls into a deep sleep, waking up with a prodigiously tough snore, to find the ghost of Christmas present before him. After being shown the joy of the Cratchit family's Christmas in spite of their modest means, and the terrifying sight of the emaciated children want and ignorance, he is left alone. But only for a moment. There is no going back to sleep after what he has seen, and straight away the most horrifying of all the spirits appears, the ghost of Christmas yet to come, revealing the chilling consequences if he chooses not to change course. What happens in the final stave of the book fills only 7 of its 90 or so pages, but Scrooge's transformation is truly remarkable, miraculous perhaps. He has an epiphany, a eureka moment that changes the course of his life. Such transformative experiences are more generally considered in spiritual or philosophical terms, and are not really the remit of psychiatry. Unless his Christmas morning spending spree in good cheer was a manic episode. But I think I might be stretching it a bit now. His uncharacteristic glee could be consistent with the mood elevation of mania, but in bipolar disorder, what goes up must come down, and Scrooge never comes down. So, can we explain any of Scrooge's behaviour in neuroscientific terms? I think one could make a case for his visitations being complex hallucinations, and it is of note that 2 out of the 4 of them occurred in the transition from sleep to wakefulness. This twilight, in-between world of marginal consciousness fascinated Dickens. He owned a copy of one of the latest medical texts on sleep and its disorders, and corresponded with doctors on the nature of dreams. He suffered from severe insomnia for much of his life, and when he couldn't sleep, he would get out of bed and walk the streets of London for hours, marching down tree-lined avenues and the darkest back alleys to tire himself out so that he could get some sleep on his return. He was also troubled by recurring dreams about his childhood, and he also maintained a rather unusual nocturnal routine of lying in the middle of his bed, his head pointing north, his arms outstretched, and his hands equidistant from the edges, in the belief that this somehow enhanced his creativity. And in his writing, Dickens' characters frequently suffer from sleep problems, insomnia, restless legs syndrome, sleep paralysis, vivid dreams, nightmares, night terrors, sleepwalking, and hallucinations. In Oliver Twist he writes, "Reality and imagination become so strangely blended that it is afterwards almost a matter of impossibility to separate the two." But it is in A Christmas Carol that he most thoroughly explores the mysterious and uncharted territory between sleep and wakefulness. Not all of Scrooge's hallucinations were related to sleep, however, so what could have caused these? With his very meagre diet, I think he may have been lacking in vitamin B1, also known as thiamine, normally found in whole grains, peas and beans, and some meats and fish. Thiamine deficiency is known as beriberi and became a major illness in Asia in the 19th century as healthy brown rice began to be replaced by polished white rice. It didn't feature in the official causes of death for London in the 1840s, but as you can see from the table, the causes listed are not precise medical diagnoses, but broad and rather vague categories, especially in Section 4, Diseases of the Brain. So it is quite conceivable that some of these, perhaps many of these, could have been due to thiamine deficiency. In developed countries, the most common cause nowadays is alcoholism, but it can also occur in severe vomiting or diarrhoea. The most dramatic medical presentation of thiamine deficiency is Wernicke's encephalopathy, a sudden onset of confusion, unsteady gait, and problems with eye movement. This condition was first described in 1881 by German neurologist Karl Wernicke, and the discovery that it was treatable by giving thiamine was made in the 1930s. But just because no one had recognised it doesn't mean it didn't exist in Dickens' day. So, drawing it all together, could Ebenezer Scrooge have been pushed into a hard-hearted rejection of humanity by his early life experiences? Yes. Could his visitations have been complex hallucinations? Yes. The psychobiology of sleep and incipient psychosis could be an explanation of what happened, but whether it is the explanation, I will leave to you. And what would Dickens have thought about all this? I think he would have been fascinated by 21st century neuroscience, the amazing images of the brain we can now see, the chemistry of what's going on inside, and our increasing understanding of how everything connects up and relates to human behaviour both in health and disease. But I also think he would have been appalled that 180 years after his cautionary tale about the dire consequences of unchecked greed, so many people live lives indistinguishable from that of the untransformed Scrooge. And that is why A Christmas Carol remains so powerful and so relevant today. Whether Scrooge's transformation was due to the intervention of the supernatural, or to neurotransmitters in his noddle, what is important is that each of us have it within us to be a better, kinder, more caring, less selfish person, if only we try. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it interesting. Please let me know your views, as this is the first time I've tackled a fictional character. Please let me know if there are any other favourite characters you'd like me to cover, or indeed if you think I'd be better off just sticking to real people. If you're interested in the whole idea of hallucinations, pseudo-hallucinations and psychosis, then please check out my video on Viktor Kandinsky, a Russian psychiatrist who was troubled by hallucinations. And please remember to subscribe and click for notifications to be kept up to date with the latest videos. But apart from that, I'll say cheerio for now, and I hope to see you again soon. Goodbye.